Welcome back to the Catch Some Soulshine podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Renee Bova. I'm super excited to announce my guest today. His name is, I'm going to just read his bio, Marcos Luis, and he's an award-winning actor, filmmaker, host, creator of OneMicNite, which is a podcast. He also has a live segment and a talk. He's a social media influencer. He supports other artists, which he did support me. Thank you so much for that. He's a member of SAG-AFTRA and AEI and an international humanitarian, which we will talk about today. Again, I want to remind you to like and subscribe to the podcast because that does help me get the message out to more people, and share it with your friends. Thank you, Marcos, for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on. We had a conversation prior to today, and he's very inspiring. I love the stuff that you're doing.
Thank
So
you for
thank
having
you.
me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
As you know, my podcast focuses on really basically living a full and happy and joyful life, healing and awakening brilliance after some of life's darkest moments. And I haven't found anyone on the podcast yet that hasn't endured some dark moments in life. And at that point, we have a choice. There's maybe a fork in the road. We can choose to go right or we can choose to go left. And I do believe that the things that we do to help ourselves grow and become better people determines what fork in the road we choose. If you want to start out by, giving people a little background about you and your life and journey.
Sure. You know what? First of all, you're going to get the exclusive because it's been a long time since anyone's interviewed me. So I'm going to give you some
Wow.
exclusive information. Well, like you said, first of all, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. Yeah, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I was born. I grew up in a family of entertainment. My
Wow.
grandfather was a famous gospel singer. He was the predecessor to all the big gospel singers that you hear now. His group was called the Fireside Singers, and they were based in Nashville, Tennessee. So I would wake up in the mornings and see him on TV and hear them on the radio. Entertainment was in my blood. When I was 5 years old, my parents got a divorce. There were, some problems in the household. It sort of shaped my life in a way and sort of drove me to a path that I'm in now. Parents divorced. My mother, who was an actress, also at the time, I used to go to see her on stage in theaters, incredible actress. She decided to put herself back through school. She had 2 kids to take care of, single parent household. What is she going to do? So she put herself back through grad school and became the valedictorian of her school at 28 years old. So she put herself back as an older woman to inspire me. In the meantime, I lived with my grandmother, who, of course, instilled some values in me that I still have today. One of which, being a Southern boy, is always hold the door for a woman, always, things like that. Those are just Southern charm things that happen. After that, my mother was able to put me in a boarding school right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I kind of lived my life going through boarding school and learning different things and being curious and a high achiever. Shortly went to Northwestern University for university. So I kind of lived a life that most people don't live, although my parents weren't wealthy, but I got a chance to live a life of I don't want to say privilege, but just a lot better than most people. So in return, growing up, I always did a lot of service. So I was always working for the Red Cross. I would always go to old senior citizen homes and do poetry and cooking and, just kind of bring life to people. Yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. And then that kind of translated into the arts.
When I talk about art, of course, my medium is, of course, I do love music. I love music, all types of music. Anything that feeds you creativity, why can't I say that word? Creatively, not only helps your brain, but it also helps your heart. And
Definitely.
feel like it's such a wonderful healing modality, even if you're not pursuing it full time,
Right.
to put some of that creativity into your life brings so much back to you and to
Right.
other people. So how did you get started in the acting?
Like I said, my mother was an actress, so I'd always see her on stage. When I was 5, when I was 6, I would see her on stage. I would sit in the front row. From then on, I just started doing the school plays. I was the lead in the school play. I hosted a kids show when I was in middle school. So it's always been a part of my life, just being in the arts. Everyone in my family is in the arts. My niece now is an incredible actress in Tennessee. She works with the Tennessee Rep. My nephew, gospel music. He's following my grandfather's footprints. Everyone in my family is doing it. My cousin, lead singer of a band. So it's just always been around me. We've always listened to music. We've always been, on stage. So I studied theater when I went to the university, to Northwestern University, in film. I always loved watching films, mostly foreign films. And I just felt that it was important to express myself through dance, through music, through stage and film. And it's always been a part of my life. The way that I got started with OneMicNite, which is my company, I was working in a restaurant in the West Village of New York, which is where I live. And I wanted to generate some business for the restaurant. So I invited a woman who was a singer at the last place that I worked at. I told her to come in, maybe you can play your guitar and we can generate some business. So we kick open the door and people started coming in. And I thought, well, wow, we really have something here. I said, so next week you invite, her name is Maritri Garrett, by the way, incredible artist. You invite some of your musician friends here. I'll invite some poets and some actors. They can do some monologues and we'll see I'll bring one microphone, thus the name One Mic. I'll bring one microphone and we'll see what we get. Well, what do you know? Everybody just started coming in. People they loved it. Fast forward a few months, the place was packed. And above the place was residential. A singer named Corey Glover, who was in Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway. He's the lead singer for the band Living Color, came in, blew the roof off of the place. The neighbors came down. Listen, we love what you're doing. This is Monday night. We have to work tomorrow. You can't be here anymore. So we got kicked out. Well, lo and behold, that night, an owner of a nightclub just happened to come in. His name was Chris. He said, man, this is great. If you ever have something, if you ever need a place, let me know. He owned a big nightclub on the Lower East Side. So I walked out. I said, Chris, you're not going to believe this. But we just got kicked out. He's like, all right, man, just come on over. Come on over. So the next Monday, we went to this place. It was called 40C, 40 Avenue C, which is right around the corner. If you're in New York, New Eurekan Poet Cafe, famous. So it was right around the corner from New Eurekan Poet Cafe, very artsy area of New York. So I started just bringing in independent bands. I had the largest poetry event in New York. I had the largest comedy event in New York. And I created it to support other artists. And in turn, I got to host the show. So this was back when YouTube first started. So I had a camera sitting on top of the bar, and it was in HQ. It wasn't HD, it was HQ. So I would jump up, turn the camera on. I would run down, introduce the guest, run back to the bar, turn the camera off, turn it back on, because I had no editing tools at the time. So I would just upload straight into YouTube. So on my YouTube channel at OneMicNite, I have videos from 2006, 2005 of all these incredible artists that came through OneMicNite.
I can't wait to go back and watch that. I did not even realize that. That's so cool.
That's how
I
I started
love that.
OneMicNite. And it was the biggest platform to support independent artists in New York.
So you've got that giving heart. You've got that yes quality. Fear can hold people back a lot.
It really can. It can. If you think about it too, in retrospect, I was kind of just doing what I needed to do. I never thought that 18 years later, it would be OneMicNite podcast. I never thought about that. I never thought about what the YouTube videos mean. These artists can go back and look and say, hey, this is where I started. This is where I am now. I can look back and say, look at what I've done to help inspire me to keep going forward.
So I know you do a lot of humanitarian work. I also know that you went overseas to help, and I'd like you to share that.
I did. I worked for Healing the Children organization, which, if you don't know, goes to different parts of the country as well as domestically, but internationally mostly, to repair the cleft palate of kids. That's mostly what they do. So I was invited as an artist, as a photographer, to go and document this particular trip. So it was in Colombia. It was a little bit outside of Bogota in a little city called Villavicencio in the Andes Mountains. So people would come by foot, by donkey, by however they could get there to get the free service from the doctors and the nurses. So I was so honored to go to document this trip for them. We did the most amount of surgeries that this organization has ever done. We received an award from the president of Colombia, the Department of Health. They threw a huge party. But the biggest part for me, in addition to the artwork that I did and being able to talk to people by default in Spanish in the recovery room, was that I got to sing the national anthem to represent the United States in front of thousands of people, and it was broadcast all over the country. I will never forget
Wow.
that.
You didn't tell me that
I will
before.
never forget that.
So cool.
Never forget that. I
That's
was
so cool.
scared. It was amazing.
People think that service work, you have to have this huge commitment of time and it's just a lot of stuff that you have to do, but I don't think that people realize the gifts that you receive when you put yourself out there to help others.
Absolutely. If you think about the small amount of time it takes you to do one thing that means the world to someone else, the impact that one little thing that you do has on someone else, it's incredible. It's immeasurable. Sitting in the recovery room with this woman who just had major surgery, she had a cyst, removed, and her family couldn't make it there. Just to hold her hand for 1 minute and tell her that everything's okay. The impact that had.
I'm going to tell you a story. I went to this speaking convention and this guy was telling the story, and he was saying how years ago he went into recovery and he was going to this place and he didn't know anybody and he was fearful and he doesn't remember anything about it. But it was his first time he entered into that room. And he said, as I was leaving, this older woman gently placed her hand on my shoulder and she very quietly said, how you doing? And he said, I remember her smell. I remember her touch. I remember her face. And she said, I'm so glad you're here. Keep coming back. He said, I have never forgotten that. And he said, it was almost like she was an angel. I never saw her again. So when you talk about that little tiny piece of kindness that you show other people, that might be something that woman will carry with her for the rest of her life.
The rest of her life. There's so many stories that I can tell you about that. It's incredible. Some of those people still to this day reach out to me, and it's been probably 10 years. I still get messages from them.
So I'd like you to express to people, because one of the things that I really truly believe is the healing power of creativity, what that brings to your life, going on stage, acting, sharing those things.
Well, I have to say, in the last year, I've had a sort of a re-spark of my love for theater. Part of the reason why I stopped doing theater is because the projection of the voice. I'm not a loud speaker. I've always had trouble speaking loudly on stage. Being on stage again last year was the most incredible thing. The freedom, the stories that I'm telling, the ability to embody certain characters and touch people's lives with some of the stories. And I'll give you one example. One of the plays that I did, it was a one-act play called 20th Anniversary, which was written by a first-time playwright named Marcus Harmon, who actually 10 years ago was OneMicNite was his first open mic as a singer. So he wrote this one-act play, incredible. He wrote this one-act play, and in the back of his mind, he thought about me to play this role. So it was about the 20th anniversary of the events that happened here in New York on 9/11. One particular story of two firemen who were getting together on the anniversary of 9/11, and they lost their third best friend. The dialogue that takes place between the two of them. My character had PTSD. So for me to be able to do the homework as an actor, watch the documentaries, embody that, because I lived here in New York when that happened. So I know my own experiences. But to reproduce that in a way that touched people's lives in the audience was it's incredible. It's
Mhm.
freeing. People were crying. People came up to me afterwards and they shared their personal stories with me about 9/11 from being here in New York and how powerful the play was about and what my performance was about and my co actor's performance was about, and just touching people's lives in different ways by telling the story. It's amazing the
I'm
power.
You make me wanna see it, and I mean, I'm like, "I wanna see that,"
Yeah.
because I remember where I was, what I was doing. I was working in a recovery room, and they have these little TVs in the bays for people waiting to go back into surgery. All of a sudden, there's showing this, and it was almost like when the first plane hit, it was almost like shock, disbelief, "What is
Yes.
happening?
Hmm.
Could that have been an accident?" And then the second plane hit,
Right.
and complete shock, disbelief, like,
Shocking.
"How can this happen?" I
And
can't
while
imagine living in New York.
it was horrible because at the time I also had another friend who was a photographer. He ran down to the World Trade Center and took photographs. And now
Mm,
he's an international photojournalist because of those
wow.
photographs that he got.
Yeah.
Ron Wilson, I have to say his name, Ron Wilson, who's also on my podcast. You can hear his story. Just the power of the pictures that he has. And I'm sure you've even seen his pictures and photographs and didn't even know. But the
I'm sure I
power of
have.
his art touching
Yeah,
people and
yeah.
seeing people's faces when that event happened, it's
Mhm.
powerful.
What kind of photography do you like to take? I mean, I know you did the humanitarian photography, but I'm sure there's other things that you like to take too.
I feel like I'm a multimedia artist because I like photography. My passion is acting, but I also make films. So everything for me is storytelling. Like
Mm.
still life, I like lifestyle. I modeled for years. We won't have that story today, but
Maybe next
um,
time.
there's a lot to that story. But yeah, it's just art. Art being a way to express yourself in so many different ways
Mhm.
is what I like. Every different way.
I relate to that wholeheartedly because I feel like that's what I do with my art too. It's like a way to tell a story through visual where no words are needed.
And I think that's the idea. And I think we touched on this too earlier. But it's when you do visual art, you want to have people question. You want people to dive into it. And even as an artist, a visual artist, or even as an actor, the
Mhm,
message that we're trying to send isn't always the message that people receive. You're allowed to
right.
make your own assessment of what's happening. And that's the beauty of
Mhm,
art. There's not
mhm.
one finite answer.
I
Yeah,
really like abstract. I mean, I do a lot of somewhat realistic, but I love abstract art too because there's so many different interpretations that you can
absolutely.
get from the
Absolutely.
art, and people will tell me stories, and I'm like, "Huh, I never saw that. Wow, that's pretty cool."
I love that
Art is
art
the
abstract.
universal language
It
for
is,
sure.
as is music. And when you combine the
Yes.
two, pow!
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking before about the energetic exchange. We're all energetic beings.
Mhm,
I've often thought of my brain as like a sponge. I'm such a visual person, okay? So my brain's a sponge, right?
mhm.
And you can hold the sponge, but eventually the water will trickle out of that and you have to put more into the sponge.
Mm,
When it comes to energy, I feel like it's the same thing. What are we feeding ourselves? What are we doing for our body? And I've done so much work with, emotional and mental and spiritual. My physical health kind of took a back seat. I did
yeah,
a lot of emotional eating, not eating the right foods.
sure.
So that's kind of like the big focus right now is to regain my health. I'd like you to speak a little bit about all the things that you do for you as an individual so that you, because I feel your energy. I
Mhm.
mean, it's undeniable. I just feel this great connection. You're so easy to talk to.
Likewise.
So how do you do that? What do you do to
Um,
feed that?
I think it's important to be in tune to one yourself. That's first. And as you said, do the inner work. And two, the things that are going on around you. Be in tune to people. It's as simple as having a conversation with someone as we're doing right now. It's you
Mhm.
speaking, me receiving, me digesting, me responding. That's where the connection is. We have to be in tune to each other first.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's also, I think you touched on this too, with the gentleman you were talking about. When I come in contact with people, even if I'm going to a service industry, say like if I go to the DMV and I need a document fulfilled, look at the person. Hey, I like your scarf. If you like the scarf, I like your scarf. Instantly, you have a connection with that person. Instantly, there's a different energy that happens with that person. I'll tell you this, you may not have all the documents you need to get your driver's license processed, but they may give you a pass and say, hey, this time. It's just about making connections with people on a
It's
one-on-one.
so
And
true.
it's very
It
important.
it's funny you bring up the DMV because I hear so many horror stories about the DMV and they're so
Yes.
slow and they're not happy. And I've not had that
I've
experience.
not either.
You put your best foot forward. I've taken bad pictures and I laugh at it and they're not gonna let you take it again. So you
Right.
might as well accept it.
You may as well. Right.
That energy that you put out can change the whole trajectory of the interaction
Absolutely. It's when
for
you
sure.
wake up in the morning. What are you thinking when you wake up? Are you thinking, oh man, I have to go to work today? Or are you thinking, I get to go to work today? My legs are working.
I
My heart
say
is
that.
beating. My eyes are working. I get to go to work today. That's the
Yes.
energy we have to leave with in the morning. That's the gratitude. That's the thanks.
We talked about meditation, my feelings on how important it is. Do you meditate?
Absolutely.
Can you share what does that do for you and how does that help you?
Mhm. I think you have to find a place where there's peace. You have to be in tune to yourself and your body. And as you said, your nutrition, your physical. I'm a man of a certain age. The birth certificate doesn't lie. I'm not 25. I may look 35. I'm not. So in the morning, I have to take a moment and be at peace, bring myself back to the gratitude, as we spoke about earlier, too. Take a moment before I respond, even if the
Mm.
situation is elevated. Just take a moment, just go back, respond in a kind way. Believe me, you're going to get more out of that than you're going to get if you keep elevating the conversation.
Yeah, what do they say? I get my phrases mixed up, but there's like peace in the pause
Peace
or
and
or
pause.
something. If we just take a second to stop, pause, digest, and then respond. There's so many different ways to meditate, and I've heard people say, "This is the best way, that's the best way." I really don't care how you do it.
Right.
There's guided meditation that you can listen to help you. There's music that you can listen to just take you to that place of peace. I recently started just turning on the fan, trying to concentrate on the hum of the fan
Right.
that's blocking us off.
It's called mental mind clutter. That's what we want to get
Yeah.
rid of. The mental mind
Yes.
clutter. That's exactly what we want to get rid of.
I never heard it called that before, but I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna start using that.
Yep.
It's so true,
Yeah.
you
We
know?
want to get rid of it because that's what's obstructing us to move forward and to get things accomplished. So for
Yeah.
me, I live alone, luckily, and I know for you, you have your family, but where do you find that peace? Do you take 10 minutes? Do you go in the restroom and just say, okay, let me get away. Let me have a minute of quiet to myself. For me,
Mhm,
when I get home, I have peace. I light my
mhm,
candles. I can sit here. There's no TV, there's no music, there's no anything. It's me in tune to myself. And as I
mhm.
said, being a man of a certain age now I'm working again on my physical. partly because I have a film coming up and I need to be in shape. But you have to be in shape. You have to eat properly. You have to take care of yourself.
One of the things that brings me peace and doodling or just doing things in my art journal, not paintings that I plan on showing or giving to people, but just playing in the art journal, just the
Right.
act of doing. I do try and set aside that time where it's just quiet. And I used to jog, then I yogged, and now I walk.
Hilarious.
People would say, "Oh, what do you listen to when you do that?" And, most of the time, I just listen to whatever's outside, you know? I don't have any
It's
ear pods in, I just go out for a walk.
right. It's whatever. It's an individual situation. It's just like,
Mhm.
spirituality versus religion.
Yeah,
Spirituality is an individual thing.
right,
It's your
right.
relationship with whatever you believe in. You can call
Yeah,
it God, you can call it chicken soup, you can call it, whatever the energy
yeah,
force is around you that you believe
yeah,
in, but it's
yeah.
your individual relationship with that.
I just had a talk with, my pastor, and I was really open about my spiritual beliefs, which maybe don't quite align with some of the traditional beliefs, but
Mhm.
she was so receptive, and she said, the sun is always there. Because I was talking about, meditation and this kind of stuff. And she said, yeah, it's like a cloudy day. The sun's there. You might not be able to see it, but it's there.
Absolutely.
And you
That's a
have to
great
feel it and believe it and keep nurturing yourself. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. And then the other thing we talked about was what is God? What is source? What is energy? What is universal law? She said, really, it boils down to one word: love. That's what
yes.
it is,
Yes.
you know? Love.
And I think
It's,
that's across the board for religion. I think
yeah,
the essence of all the religions is that it's love.
right.
And you can call it whatever you want to. There may be certain rituals that you practice in different religions, but
Hmm.
essentially it's about love.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's so inspiring. So when people talk about an eye for an eye, or is that really love?
Right.
Is it? I don't know.
No.
Is there anything else you want to share with people about you?
Oh, about me. No, I mean, One Mic Night, I call it the One Mic Night Talk Live Pod. As I said, it started off as a live series. So we'll be going back to the live series soon. It may be a virtual open mic, but definitely a platform again to support artists. The talk is a segment of the podcast where we come on and we talk about mostly mental health and awakening, and as we're doing right now. So that's One Mic
Mhm.
Night Talk, and the podcast is One Mic Night Podcast, where we hear the inspirational journeys and interviews with people. All that's on OneMicNite.com. All the on One Mic Night everything. As far as me personally, I have a film coming up soon. Don't want to talk too much about it because I haven't signed on the dotted line yet. But I'm also working on a series that I wrote myself. So I'll produce that. Stuff
And
going
people
on.
can find you on YouTube, right?
Definitely find me on YouTube at One Mic Night. And I'm Marcos Luis on all social media, Marcosluis.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. I'm sure
And
it'll happen.
yes, me too. I want to thank you again for joining me for this episode of Catch Some Soulshine with Marcos Luis. He's an actor, philanthropist, and overall a good human being. Go check out his podcast, One Night Mike. Stay tuned for future collaborations that he and I may do. As always, please like and subscribe to this podcast. If you're on Apple or Spotify, leave me a rating. That helps me reach more people. And I'm trying to reach 500 on my YouTube channel. So make sure you hit that little bell. Check out the comments in the podcast for freebies that I always give away, such as your affirmation journal that you can download, a free print of my Rooted in Faith collection. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next week.